Shalom. First and foremost, call halal yamlah, Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem HaRachak Wadash. Double honors to the apostles, the bishops, and the elders of Great Millstone that I learned this truth from. And also peace and salutations to the hopeful elect of the nation of Israel, scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. And in this video, I'm going to be going into an article from a Newsbreak app. And the source of this article is from PC Gamer, as you see here on the screen. And as you see from the title of the article, alright, U.S. Department of Homeland Security has reportedly demanded personal information about ISIS critics from Discord, Reddit, Google, and Meta. Okay, which I believe Meta is Facebook. Alright, and it says at least 3 of those platforms have complied. Alright. In recent months, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security has issued hundreds of administrative subpoenas. Alright, and basically when you look up a subpoena, it is basically a court order. Okay, order, telling you to report to a particular court hearing. All right. It says, in recent months, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security has issued hundreds of administrative subpoenas to Google, Reddit, Discord, and Meta to obtain the identifying information of individuals being behind accounts that track or criticize immigration and ICE operations, according to New York Times reporting. All right. According to 4 federal officials and tech industry workers, all right, who spoke on condition of anonymity, the issued subpoenas requested that the companies provide names, email addresses, telephone numbers, and other data that could be used to identify Americans who publicly decry ICE or identify the locations of its agents. All right, and that's clearly, an attack on the First Amendment. All right, attack on free speech. All right, but these are the times that we're in according to prophecy. Okay, as as Scripture says, unrighteous decrees. All right. Isaiah 10:1, woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, and that right grievousness which they have prescribed, to turn aside the needy from judgment, and to take away the right from the poor of my people, that widows may be their prey, and that they may rob the fatherless. All right, yeah. So these unrighteous decrees that we've been seeing, over the past year, especially under this Trump administration. Okay, it's all ultimately for the purpose of, taking away the rights of these people, these so-called American people, taking away their First Amendment rights, all right, taking away their Fourth Amendment rights, okay, and pretty much, systematically bringing this place, America, Babylon the Great, into the NWO, all right, and, with stuff like this, okay, what we just read so far in this article, pretty much Esau, Edom, via this Trump administration, is getting ready to crack down on particular platforms. All right, the platforms that it listed so far, Google, Reddit, Discord, and Meta, which again I believe Meta is Facebook, if I'm not mistaken. All right, but Esau, Edom is getting ready to crack down on these different platforms. All right, these different social media platforms, to crack down on anybody that's speaking out against, of course, these Ice Cube agents, right? Speaking out against and ultimately speaking out against the Trump administration, and ultimately speaking out against the NWO agenda. All right. These are the type of moves that Esau, Edom, via this Trump administration, okay, are moving, okay, to pretty much bring Babylon the Great America into the NWO. All right. And as Scriptures also says in Sirach, the book of Sirach 42, right, Sirach 42, we start at verse 18. This is talking about the power that the Most High Yahweh has. Okay, but it says, He seeketh out the deep and the heart, and considereth their crafty devices. For the Lord knoweth all that may be known, and He beholdeth the signs of the world. He declareth the things that are past and for to come, and revealeth the steps of hidden things. Verse 20. No thought escapeth him, neither any word is hidden from him. And you see Esau, Edom is seeking to have this type of power on the left hand side through carnal left hand means, okay, through pseudoscience, all right, technology, technocracy, AI, mass surveillance, okay. And you see, with moves like this, okay, now being done by the DHS, okay, to pretty much contact these different social media platforms, okay, for these platforms to give the personal and the sensitive information of different people that's on social media, these different platforms that's criticizing these Ice Cube agents and their operations and their arrest, okay, and what they're really doing behind the scenes, okay. He is getting ready to crack down on those, all right, that are ultimately speaking out against his NWO agenda, all right, speaking out against these ICE agents, all right. He's trying to set up a technocracy and set up AI and pseudoscience, okay, for, as it read again in Sirach 42 and verse 20. No thought escapeth him, neither any word is hidden from him, all right. And that's the type of power that Esau's trying to gain through AI, okay, mass surveillance via AI, pseudoscience, technology, technocracy, okay, because we know, all right, there's various articles and information that you can look up where these ICE agents, okay, have been using things like social media to track down who they deem as illegal migrants and illegal criminals and violent criminals and all these things. And on top of that, we also know that these ICE agents are also using AI and Palantir and facial recognition to, target, who they deem as illegal aliens and migrants and all these things. Okay. And not to mention, you got, Esau under the Trump administration building up AI data centers all over the country. Okay. And as well as setting up, AI mass surveillance all over the country. Okay. And mind you as well, as we've been seeing, as you pretty much been seeing all throughout social media over the past year or so, as these Ice Cube agents have been ramping up with more and more of their arrests and their operations, okay, detaining people, all right, it's been a lot of criticism online against what they're doing. People getting online, posting these memes and whatnot, posting these comments, okay, cursing out these Ice Cube agents, right? And especially over these recent shootings that's been taking place up there in Minnesota, okay? A lot of these Americans, especially these Edomite Americans, are, seeing that these Ice Cube agents are, have no regard for their constitutional rights, have no regard for whether you're a legal citizen or whether you're a legal citizen or not here in Babylon the Great America. Pretty much, if you're against Trump and you're against the, his administration, and if you're ultimately against the NWO, then, they're pretty much going to come after you. Okay, they're already going door to door. Okay, they're already, unaliving people in the middle of the street. Legal citizens included, Edomite Americans included. Okay, and so they're getting ready to get even more draconian. Okay. This Trump administration, okay, is getting ready to, unleash these Ice Cube agents to make them more draconian, as it speaks of in Revelation 13, verse 11, which we always get. Okay, the two horns like a lamb, the Democrats and Republican Party, okay, getting ready to speak as a dragon, draconian measures, draconian, laws, okay. And again, Esau's already, using the DHS and ICE to crack down on all these different social media platforms, okay, and gain, personal information and sensitive information against, people that are online and on these different social media platforms, criticizing the DHS and criticizing these Ice Cube agents. Well, guess what? How much more in the near future, YouTube, okay? How much more, all right, in the near future is the DHS, going to crack down on these different YouTube pages and YouTube channels against anybody that's on YouTube speaking out against these ICE agents and these ICE operations, okay? And we know that's ultimately all going to lead to the famine of the hearing of the word. You see that? It's going to ultimately lead to the famine of the hearing of the word, okay? Because we know ultimately that all these plays that Esau's using is all going to be used to ultimately target the truth, to ultimately target the men of the Lord that have the testimony of Yahweh Shema Shai, which are the words of these scriptures, okay, these prophecies, which speaks to the downfall and ultimate judgment, divine judgment upon Esau, Edom, okay. So we know Esau is especially going to have a special target against the message that we, the hopeful elect, the men of the Lord, are preaching, okay. And let's get Isaiah 29. Isaiah 29 and verse 20 says, "For the terrible one is brought to naught, and the scorner is consumed." Okay, and of course, who's the terrible one? Esau, Edom. Okay, the so-called white man. He's being brought to naught because what? This truth is sprung up. This word is going out. Okay, the gospel has been spread throughout the four corners of the earth in the name of Yahweh Shema Shai. Okay, this gospel, this testimony, which is casting down all the strongholds of Esau, Edom. Okay, and as well, he's also being brought to naught by even his own people. Okay, other Edomites getting on social media, getting on these different platforms, exposing the wicked agenda of their elites, right? Exposing the wicked agenda of their government, right? These different whistleblowers and whatnot. Okay. Even Esau's own tongue is falling upon themselves, right? But at the end of the day, it's all bringing his devil down to naught. Okay, it's a shameful spewing on his glory. All right, Esau is being made bare more and more each day. You see that? Because when the time where the Lord is making inquisition upon Esau, okay, thorough, intense investigation, examination upon Esau, Edom, all before the Lord brings judgment upon him. You see that? But it says, Isaiah 29 verse 20 again, "For the terrible one is brought to naught, and the scorner is consumed," all right, with the spirit of the Lord's mouth, as it says in Second Thessalonians, the 2nd chapter, all right, the mouth of the prophets, okay, through the Holy Spirit and power of Yahweh Shema Shai. It says, "And all that watch for iniquity are cut off," okay, verse 21, "that make a man an offender for a word, and lay a snare for him that reproveth in the gate, and turn aside the just for a thing of naught." And you see, things like this, okay, things like what this article is going into right here, this is a snare, okay. The DHS, pretty much tapping into, these different platforms, Google and Meta and Reddit and so on and so forth, okay, to target and gain personal and sensitive information of people that are online speaking out against the DHS and speaking out against ICE. Okay, this is a snare. Okay, a snare to make a man an offender for a word. Okay, to make a man, all right, an offender for, speaking out against, okay, basically this Gestapo that this Trump administration has pretty much unleashed across, Babylon the Great America, okay, with full immunity, all right, full immunity from, being brought to justice, being put on trial, right, being tried for, for their actions, right. These, Ice Cube agents have been given full immunity, okay, to do what they're doing, all right, going door to door, okay, pulling up on people while they're walking down the sidewalk. Okay, just grabbing them up, arresting them, throwing them into the back of trucks. okay, while keeping their faces covered, right? This, but what we're looking at right here, okay, this is all a snare, okay, to make a man an offender for a word, for speaking out against basically this Gestapo that's that's running rampant across America, Babylon the Great, okay. And as a matter of fact, I even looked up right here the meaning of the word Gestapo on Google. All right, and this is the AI overview. It says the Gestapo, okay, which stands for Secret State Police. All right, was the brutal official secret police force of Nazi Germany and German-occupied Europe. It says formed in 1933 and led by figures like Heinrich Himmler. It operated outside judicial review to eliminate political opposition, enforce Nazi ideology, and orchestrate the. All right, you see that word right there, okay? And then it goes into key details. It says meaning literally translates to secret state police, okay? And that's how, that's what these Ice Cube agents were set up for, okay? Secret, state, police, federal agents, okay, operating outside of, normal judicial, bounds, okay, operating with full immunity. You see that, going door to door, which is a clear violation of, the Fourth Amendment rights, okay. And then now they're tapping into these different platforms like Google and Reddit and so on and so forth to track and trace, okay, and ultimately come after people that are criticizing these Ice Cube operations, okay, which is a clear violation of the First Amendment, right? Further attack on free speech, right? And it says function. It was tasked with detecting, arresting, and neutralizing any potential or actual enemies of the Nazi regime. You see that? It says authority. The Gestapo had the power to arrest people without judicial review, right? Well, without due process, right? Which is what we've been seeing them doing, okay, to many of the northern tribes over this past year. Okay, just grabbing them up, without not giving them any due process, not allowing them to prove their citizenship, right? Or that they're here, under legal means, just basically going around profiling, so-called brown faces, people that fit a particular description, so to speak, right? And just using that as a means to just grab them up, arrest them, and take them to who knows where, and do who knows what with them. You see that? That's pretty much exactly how the Gestapo operated back in Germany during the 30s. Okay? It says again, authority. The Gestapo had the power to arrest people without judicial review and acted with complete impunity. You see that? And do we not see that today here in Babylon and Great America under, with these Ice Cube agents? Okay? Hey, that which is then is now, as the scripture says, right? And then it goes into the whole, this right here, which, when you look up, deep information on, okay, this right here, there's, videos and information that, on the net, okay, showing that whole thing was, but, I'll just leave it right there, okay, but, yeah, so we're literally seeing a modern day Gestapo, okay, here throughout the streets of America, Babylon the Great, under this current Trump administration. You see that? And as we as we've been going into in this article right here, pretty much, we're at a point of prophecy, okay, to where anybody that's been online over these months and weeks and so on and so forth, cursing out these Ice Cube agents and cursing out their operations, how they're just going around profiling people and arresting people, right, dragging people out of their cars, out of their houses, unaliving people in the street, Now they're getting ready to come after those that are criticizing them, okay, speaking out against them, and making them an offender for a word, as we just read, okay. Because mind you, with all these AI data centers that's been built up across America under this Trump administration, all these AI data centers, okay. What you think all these data centers are being built up for? Okay, to collect data, collect information, okay, collect information on what people are saying online, okay, tracking what Esau would consider conspiracy theories and things like that, things that people are saying online, particular messages online. That's what these AI data centers are being built up for, okay, so far. All right. And that's why, okay, especially on a YouTube platform, that's why over these past, weeks and months, you notice YouTube has been allowing, brothers to, say certain words and, use particular phrases that, in years past, okay, if you say particular buzzwords or say particular phrases, your videos will get flagged immediately, okay, and your channels would get terminated, okay. But over these past months and weeks, okay, certain words that would normally get your video flagged or struck, or your channel struck or taken down, okay, these things aren't happening because what? Because YouTube, okay, along with AI and so on and so forth, is doing nothing but collecting data on who's who and who's saying what's being said on particular videos, what message is going out on certain videos. And you best believe, okay, all this AI and these data centers are especially collecting the data on the message that the men of the Lord are preaching, okay. Because hey, as I went into in that video the other day, truth is the number one threat against Edomite supremacy, okay, especially the truth of Yahweh Shema Shai according to the Holy Scriptures that's being spoken in the earth and outer days out of the mouth of the Lord's prophets as men, okay, starting with the apostles, the bishops, and the elders of Great Millstone, down to the least of us that are of the hopeful elect, stand upon our feet boldly, preaching His word, preaching His gospel throughout the four corners of the earth, making our bodies living sacrifice, sacrificing our lives and our freedoms to do so, as the elder Malcolm from the GMS Chicago camp always says in his videos, right? And so yeah, this is what it's heading to, okay. All the things that people are saying online, especially the men of the Lord, okay, Esau's getting ready to make them an offender for a word by laying snares, as we just read. You see that? All for a thing of naught at the end of the day, which is what? His NWO agenda. Okay, seeking to rebuild, digital Tower of Babel, okay, where Esau wants to link everybody onto one, global digital grid via AI, technocracy, okay, and ultimately the MOTB, which is the microcia, okay, to ultimately play God on the earth, okay, to assert himself as the Most High on the earth through left-hand carnal satanic means. You see that? Let me also get this. Psalms 37 in verse 14, it says, "The wicked have drawn out the sword and have bent their bow to cast down the poor and needy and to slay such as be of upright conversation." Yeah, so even things that people are speaking online, that are right and that makes sense. Okay, Esau is getting ready to crack down upon them. Okay, all because his rulership and his elites, okay, or just ultimately doing the work of Satan throughout at the end of the day, okay. Because mind you, what would the devil, okay, what would Satan, what would the left hand consider, okay, misinformation, or what would the left hand consider, the number one threat against their energy. Okay? It's not the sword, all right? It's ultimately truth. Okay, especially the truth of Yahweh Shemashai. And that's why at the end of the day, that's why Esau is cracking down on all these platforms in the first place. Because not only, people are online and on these different platforms speaking particular truth and exposing certain things, but ultimately because Esau wants to take the truth of Yahweh Shemashai off the internet, which is what? He wants to stop this word from going out, okay? And again, that's all going to, bring forth the famine of the hearing of the word, as it speaks of in the book of Amos, the 8th chapter, okay? And so that's why, hey, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans out there, you Israelites, hey, that's why, brothers constantly exhort daily, get this word while you can, okay? And as it even speaks of in Isaiah 55 verse 6, seek ye the Lord Yahweh Bashim Shai while he may be found. Call ye upon him while he is near. Yeah, seek Yahweh Bashim Shai while he may be found. While these videos are still going up. Okay, while these, prophecy updates videos are still going up. While these exhortations are still going up. Okay, because very soon, the way, the way that Esau is moving, okay, is getting ready to be a famine of the hearing of the word. Okay, these videos will no longer be up on the internet. Okay, truth speech is going to be taken off the internet by, the elites of Esau Edom via AI and technocracy, right? The men of the Lord are no longer going to be on the highways and the byways very soon, okay? And the doors of mercy are getting ready to close, okay? And you Israelites out there that's still playing games and still, not repenting and taking the truth serious, okay? When Esau, all right, when Yahweh Shemashai, allows Esau to pretty much, crack down on those that he's going to consider enemies of his NWO agenda, okay, you Israelites out there that's not, standing 10 toes down on the Lord's business, okay, and taking the truth serious, all right, and standing firm in prophecy, okay, you're going to fold. All right, you're going to faint in the day of adversity, as it speaks of in the book of Proverbs, because what? Your faith is going to be small in these times to come. You see that? So that's why, hey, as I said again, seek ye the Lord Yahweh Shemashai while he may be found. And of course, how do you seek Yahweh Shemashai in his outer days? Through his men. Okay, by taking heed to his men. All right, taking heed to his prophets, taking heed to these videos, these exhortations, these warnings, these news and prophecies, right? Because, hey, as it speaks of in what's that? 1 Timothy 4. Yep, 1 Timothy 4:16 says, take heed unto thyself and unto the doctrine, continue in them, for in doing this thou shalt both save thyself and them that hear thee. See that? So, hey, this doctrine going out is a major aspect to salvation. Okay, it's a major aspect to the salvation of the souls of the elect. Okay, so hey, while this doctrine is still going out by the mouth of Yahweh Shemashai's men, his prophets, hey, you Israelites out there, take heed. Okay, take heed. Okay, seek Yahweh Shemashai while he may be found. Repent, convert. Get the leaven out of your spirit. Okay, get yourself right. Make your body as a living sacrifice, because hey, the doors of mercy and the doors of his ministry is getting ready to come to a close. Okay, Esau, as it says, as we always bring out in Revelation 12 and verse 12. Therefore rejoice ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time left. Okay, this devil Esau Edom is getting ready to come down with great wrath. All right, and everything, and a major part of his great wrath, okay, is what we see from these ice cube agents. Okay, if you thought 2025 was bad, okay, well, wait until you see how these ice cube agents are going to be operating in 2026 going forward. Okay, they're going to be using even more advanced technology to track and trace, okay, who they deem as migrants and violent criminals, and ultimately they're going to be used to track and trace, legal American citizens. Okay, that's going to be deemed enemy of the state, right? Against the agenda of the elites of Esau, Edom. Okay, and as well, you also have this going on as well. Okay, which I did a video on this maybe about a couple weeks ago, but right here, this is from endtimeheadlines.org. As you see from the title, Trump converts 23 giant warehouses into ICE detention centers. Okay, and who you think Esau ultimately wants to hold in these various detention centers? It's not going to be so-called migrants, right? But it is ultimately going to be legal American citizens, natural American citizens, Edomites included. Okay, and it's going to be agendas like this. Okay, that's going to lead to many Americans being thrown into these detention centers. Okay, for criticizing the DHS, criticizing against these Ice Cube agents, right? Criticizing the Trump administration, and ultimately criticizing the NWO agenda. You see that? Because again, Esau is getting ready to come down with great wrath. All right, he's getting ready to come down and come with this NWO agenda, right? Come with the charagma, okay, the micro CIP, all right, and flex his muscle and flex his sword, one last time, because he knows that Yahweh Shai is getting ready to come back and take his ass down. You see that? And again, for you Israelites out there, when Esau comes down with great wrath, hey, if you're not taking this shoot serious, if you're BSing, if you're not taking heed to these prophecies and these warnings and taking heed to the doctrine, all right, and calling on the name of Yahweh Shema Shai and getting yourself right, hey, when Esau comes down with great wrath, okay, the Lord's not going to protect you. He's not going to cover you. Okay, ultimately, the Lord's going to allow this devil to come down upon you and destroy you. All right, because what does it say in the book of Romans, the 5th chapter? Yep, Romans chapter 5 and verse 8, it says, but Yahweh commended his love toward us, all right, us the remnant, the hopeful elect, and that while we were yet sinners, Hamashiach Yahweh Shai died for us, okay, died for Israel, okay, died for the sins, all right, of Israel under that first covenant, and more importantly, died to cover the sins of the elect under this grace period, okay, leading to the return of Hamashiach Yahweh Shai, so the elect can be found blameless, without guile, without fault, right, without spot. And it says, verse 9, much more then, being now justified by his blood, all right, by Yahweh Shai's blood, we shall be saved from wrath through him. You see that? So being covered by the blood of Hamashiach Yahweh Shai is going to save you, okay, protect you from Esau's great wrath, okay, that he's getting ready to come down with. As a matter of fact, even as it also says in let's go back in Revelation 12 and let's read verse 11. It says, and they overcame him. Who's the they? The elect. And who's the him? All right, Esau, Edom. It says, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb, Yahweh Shai, and by the word of their testimony. All right, which is what? This truth, this gospel. And they loved not their lives unto the death. You see that? So hey, when Esau comes down with great wrath, okay, and use the DHS and these Ice Cube agents to track and trace, anybody that's going to be deemed as enemies of the state, right? Enemies of the NWO. Hey, if you're an Israelite and you're not covered by the blood of Hamashiach Yahweh Shai in these times to come, then hey, you're gonna be you're gonna fall victim to Esau's great wrath. You're not gonna be covered. You're not gonna be protected. All right, and ultimately you're gonna be through. You see that? You're ultimately gonna be through. All right. And so so with that, Lord willing, this video is edifying. And until next time, shalom.